See how many people return for part 2 of 3.
Yeah, well, see about 8 so far.
Yep.
We'll have to scare them away. No, just kidding.
Now this is fun. I know it's fire hose for some and a reaffirmation of things for others.
Yeah, and always some new insights. Okay. I'm going to go on mute, but to keep any background noise down, and I will be in very close earshot for anything you need.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay.
Good morning, Susan. There's a saying that my parents would say in the morning when we'd be getting up as kids, something about bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So we have a few more minutes here still. Okay, I'm going to check a little bit on some funky audio. I'm not getting any flowback right now. You guys hear me okay? Raise your hands if you can hear me okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, there seemed to be some feedback I was getting. I'm not getting it now. So I hope that continues. Cindy, I will confirm that you have some extra time to complete your brief. With the bootcamp structure as we have it online, there's for each of the assignments, the final assignments on each from each of the days, there's extra time to be able to do that and turn that in. So if you haven't yet finished your briefing from the capture portion, that's okay. You can still submit that to us a little bit later or when you get that done. The same thing will be true from the final exercise that we do today and the final exercise that we do from tomorrow. So hopefully you'll be able to find time to do those and be able to get them turned in for the credit for the course as we do this online. To teach on 3 days and the opportunity, some in between time and extra time after to be able to complete the assignments. All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to the boot camp, Business Development Boot Camp. Happy to be with you again here today. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Most of you have regular jobs, I know. There'll be opportunities to, yeah, I actually have a regular job too. So I don't do this all the time. But this is a great way to be able to still learn and share and do things in the situation that we're in, with the pandemic that we're in. I do hope that all of you are safe and well, you and your families and loved ones, and that as we continue forward, that we'll all be able to stay safe and stay well and continue to work and have opportunities for growth. So thanks for sharing your time with us this week, in particular with Bootcamp. My name is Kelson Forsgren. I participated briefly a couple of times on Monday as Brad was doing the lead. I'm taking the lead this morning. Brad will join us a little bit later. We also have Dennis Berg, who's also participated on Monday as well and he'll be chiming in as well with his insights and comments. And of course, all of you, as you have learnings and things that you want to share from your experience or ideas, things like that, we can treat this also as a regular classroom. Let's talk about it. Let's share ideas, ask questions, as well as be able to move through the things that we'll talk about today with regard to proposal management. So first of all, any questions that anybody has with regard to what you have experienced from Monday's class, things that you've learned so far that you might want to share verbally? Jonathan, you have your hand up. Did you want to share something in particular?
Sure. Thanks for allowing me the space to do so. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I had the pleasure of working on a proposal that just finished up like a week and a half, or I want to say I've lost track of days because of the pandemic and because of the lost proposal. Anyways, I was on the proposal writing team. I was this one of the SMEs for it, and I never had a. You mentioned like a fire hose before we started. I never. I'd helped here or there on proposals, but I never got such a fire hose time frame for something to kind of collectively pull together both like what the job actually is, what we're going for, and kind of also writing boilerplate language. So I kind of work for a company that, not to delve too much into it, but they've gone from a small to a mid largish. So they have, there's always some growing pains, if you will, within there. And so part of my originally I was going to take this course back in the spring pre-pandemic. The idea was to take this to get ready for the RFP, but of course that didn't work out. Obviously, that's a very minor point in all the stuff going on in the world. But so now I'm doing it kind of backwards and starting to go through what we went through on Monday, and then now I'm very interested between today and tomorrow on how best practices, etc., to help improve both myself and the way the company kind of did it, which I had definitely had some throw it over the fence kind of aspects to it.
Yeah.
It felt so. That's something that I'm keen on really trying to improve.
Well, good for you, and for your fire hose experiences that you've experienced over this past summer. So, hope that proposal goes well for you and your company. Yeah, and we'll obviously be talking about some best practices that for sure will strengthen what you guys are doing and moving forward with some confidence. So that's great. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share about what they've been experiencing over the past couple of days in particular, or other learnings that you've had? Okay. Well, great. So thanks. Today, as we are in our middle day here on proposal management, a couple other things about capture that we talked about on Monday. Thank you for those who took some time to review items from the capture guide. So for example, both Margaret and Nora posted some content there. Margaret looked at teaming in particular. When two more organizations work together to pursue an opportunity. Margaret, do you want to talk about this a little bit? I mean, we can read some of the stuff you wrote here, or you can read it on Shipley online, but is there something you want to summarize a little bit about teaming? You don't have to, you can say no. That would be okay. Margaret, if you're talking, like, I can't hear you. Okay. Well, we'll give you a chance to jump back in if you'd like at a later point, but thank you for sharing that. So there's some things that, some of the reasons that she brought up here, points to consider. So we talked in capture about teaming decisions that need to be developed early, so that's not a surprise. Oh, when the proposal hits, the RFP hits, oh, we've got to go grab somebody as a teaming partner. Sometimes we throw things together and cross our fingers that it works out. Better comparison, of course, with the discussion on Monday with regard to how to use that chart in with regard to hot buttons or topic areas of interest for the client or for the customer. Can really help us understand in discussion with others. We're not doing this in a vacuum with just our own thought process. So you're handicapped that way a little bit on Monday in doing that kind of an exercise. But you can see in talking with others about how we may fit or where we may fit. I think Brad even mentioned that one of you, as part of your discussion about weaknesses, or even in the bidder comparison, something about government experience, that one of you put a 0 for Vibrant because we didn't have any. So that was your perspective and your feeling about the client, FEMA's ESG's perspective with regard to your company. And in that sense, it might be ripe and primed to find or team with somebody who does definitely have that experience in spades. So teaming is a good situation there. Okay, other things here, a little comment from Nora. Decision gates and color team reviews. Great detail in there, especially as we have gone through decision gates, and we'll continue to talk about decision gates as we go through the next 2 days as well. And color teams that are part of the managing component and the writing component. So thanks for doing that and submitting those inputs. I wanted to show a couple of briefings that have already been turned in. Not to shame anybody, we're not trying to do that, but just an opportunity to look at what some people have done already with this bid decision briefing. So here's one from a previous, and there are a lot of slides in the original deck, in the blank deck, but when we're talking about making a presentation to management with regard to an opportunity, how many managers do you know of, by raise of hand, like to look at very long slide decks in a presentation? So it's okay to keep things brief. So, I think there were, 12 slides? There's a slide for each of the topic areas in the capture plan and the template there. But you know what? You don't have to use them all. So here's a situation about the opportunity description, simple summary there, a little bit about customers and their primary hot button. Okay, simple. One line for each, easy to understand and to capture that. And of course, can talk about it more in the actual presentation. The capability assessment for competitors and ourselves, giving you that kind of information on those other tools with regard to the things that you were able to see as part of the competitor packet and the internal assessment packet. You can copy that information here or talk about things over time. Bidder comparison, it's real easy to just cut and paste that in, and it's a nice graphical way to support your talking points. A kind of fun graphic way to highlight a couple of solution gaps. This person included the win strategy or the P-win calculator and summary of those things, and maybe if this was already understood by the company or the organization, if they understood how this P-win calculator worked, then they'd be able to understand points of weakness and points of strength in here with the result. And for this person, there was a simple final line point about what to do with capture. You saw that the the result for the from the P1 calculator is still pretty low, the 2.4 area. So with some of the recommendations and going forward, okay, maybe the company would allow this, or maybe it wouldn't. Okay. So as we move now into proposal management, some of the logistics and materials that you have as part of what we're doing, we're going to continue on in the same pattern that we have for that we used on Monday. Have breaks for exercises and breaks during the course itself. Some of the templates, tools and templates that you have at your disposal include another set of tools that we have, Proposal Manager Workbook, a planner outlining or mock-up templates and other things that are included that you can be using in both the development of content and instructions to authors, as well as color team reviews, things like that. So things that we're going to look at during proposal management today include these 3 lessons. Everybody should have received access to, based on the assignment from Capture, access to a request for proposal. It is not a full document. We didn't want to bog you down in trying to understand all of the components that go into a typical federal RFP, but we wanted to include the components that are typically most critical for a proposal manager, and eventually also those that help develop the proposal. So again, we're looking at the RFP from FEMA's ESG Commission. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look at that. I think we kept it at about 10 or 12 pages. So again, a little bit of an update about what we're dealing with. You've done the capture work on this. You've seen some of the information that has been gathered for you, things that you have made assumptions on and validations of, and now the RFP has landed. Wait a second. You're given 30 days to respond. So hang on, here we go for the ride, right? Are we ready? So I'm going to give you an opportunity here. Pull up your RFP that you have, FEMA RFP, sections L and M in particular, or anything about that. And let's take a couple of minutes here and ask some questions, allowing you to ask questions of me and of Dennis with regard to anything that you may have that you've seen from the RFP. Anybody want to raise your hand and ask some questions? Okay, Jonathan, your hand went up and then went down. That's okay. Anybody else?
I think
Yeah,
I'm
go
up.
ahead.
Yeah, I never. Here we go.
You're
Sorry.
good. Okay.
The question that kind of jumped out at me, I believe it says at the end of the RFP, it says FEMA will award a single contract to the responsible offerer, blah, blah, blah. Then in one of the earlier sections, it says it may choose to award multiple contracts. Where was that? It was in a different section, and I thought that was confusing. It was a little confusing to me.
Good. Excellent. Great question. Dennis, how would you answer that?
Well, what I've actually seen elsewhere, but pretending I'm part of this customer FEMA, is that was a an unintended conflict, and we're looking at a single award at this stage. But there may have been some earlier conversations about breaking up the work in the procurement. But right now, go with the later part of the RFP. And it's a good question to see clarification when you see those kind of direct conflicts.
Exactly. Great. Typically, and you'll see this a lot in requests for proposal that come from pretty much anybody, commercial companies or federal agencies. They use a lot of boilerplate. Some of that's required in their procurement process. So there'll be information that might be included in there from previous solicitations that is really not intended for this one. So pointing things out like that and asking that question is great to clarification. So for this purpose, the purpose of this exercise, it is a single award.
I was keen on that one because the RFP that I just went through had just looking at it from I was looking at it from a SME perspective. They had several conflicting, I was taught to, if the RFP says, plant, I don't know, make pencils, even though the job is making pens, you write making pencils in the RFP. So the RFP that I had said, do the following as defined as the following, when I knew the definition of it was wrong and the follow-up to it was also wrong. So I said, that's why I told our person running it to go ask them this question, or we're going to go forward and say we do this incorrect thing, because otherwise they're just going to say, you didn't write to the RFP. So
yeah, man, those are the most difficult ones to write to when they're when everything that has been discussed with the customer is one thing, and when the way procurement has set things out is different, and that's really challenging. And that's, if we can take advantage of the time to ask questions, that's best. Sometimes we don't get that opportunity, and those are the really squirrely ones that we all experience over time. But good point. Thanks for asking the question. Glad it jumped out at you. It may not have back in earlier pre-pandemic. Okay, Mahavir asks, I'm going to go to the chat here for a couple of them. Does ESG have any expectations for the existing staff already working on the legacy in-house system? Well, as part of the capture activity on a sidebar here, we know that that's of concern for some of the leadership there. However, is there anything specifically stated in the RFP with regard to that? Dennis, were you going to chime in there?
I was thinking about that, so yes, I will at this point. We'd like to keep our staff employed. Some may stay with this CRM initiative. There may be other work for them. What we'd like to see in your proposals is very clear assumptions or assertions of the types and level and timing of resourcing that you're expecting from us to make this system a success.
Great, thank you. And sidebar, again, you're not going to get sidebars from the customer, but sidebar is, this may be a hot button, or it has been a hot button. So did we find out if it's something that's important to ESG to have as many people as they have being able to make a transition to the system, or whatever? Is there a way that we can address that in some way? All right, end sidebar. Okay, Michael has asked a couple of questions. Actually, a statement, executive summary will be reviewed but not scored. I feel a lot of emphasis is placed on this document. From a perspective of Vibrant or our companies, whoever we may be, in presenting our solution to our customer, we feel the executive summary is critical in that, regardless of whether it's scored, because it will be looked at. Senior management, those making the decisions, will take a look at that document and want to be able to understand what's coming up or what's happening. If it's just a transmittal letter type of thing that this is what we've included and it doesn't communicate messaging, it can't help to influence favorably for us in the decision-making process. So scoring of content in your proposal it's not the whole solution. It's not the sum of that is not necessarily how that's specifically awarded. If a government agency is going for best value, then there may be some things that they do with trade-offs to make justification for selecting a different vendor, based on some of those trade-offs or things like that. So in my view, an executive summary is important to have all the time. Even if you're page limited, take some time and take some space to make a concrete sales message in showing how the customer benefits from this solution. Dennis, you want to add something to that?
Yes, thank you. Be aware that for some procurements, and this does not contradict what Kelson just communicated, the executive summary might not be distributed to the evaluator, so the evaluator might not see it for a particular proposal section. Also, the evaluator may be reluctant, even if he or she does see it, to cite it as the basis for a high section score. That doesn't make it less important. What it means, though, is be sure that all the content of the executive summary in terms of sales message, strategy, is in the scoreable parts of the proposal, right? And don't front load, particularly if you're page limited, too much into the executive summary because it might not be doing all that much for you. Now, on the flip side, if it's read, it sets the stage. It sets a set of expectations as to what's going to follow in the rest of that proposal volume where that summary appears, and that's a good thing. So use it to influence the thinking of the evaluator if he or she gets it, but recognize that it's not the basis for scoring at the same time. Back to you, Kelson.
Right. Yeah, thanks. And Michael, of course, your second comment echoes that as well. So thank you for that. So Margaret asks a question about what are the meanings and distinctions between L and M. We'll talk about that a little bit later about what each of those pieces are. And there's for federal proposals, there's a standard set of letters that they use, A through M, and each of those has a specific function in a request for proposal. And the things that are in L are typically called instructions to offerers, and section M are typically evaluation factors. And those two things combine to provide guidance about how to prepare the proposal and what the proposal will be evaluated on. All of the other components are critical as well, as they have different clauses that may need to be addressed. Section C is typically a statement of work or a performance work statement or some guidance on the technical details of what needs to be included, responded to. So there are lots of different things that you will learn in the process of what to pay attention to as a proposal manager. You have to pay attention to more things as a proposal manager than as you do as a writer. But there's guidance that you need for your response. Section B, for example, is a pricing sheet. So there may be components in that, or you may actually be directed, as we are in this RFP, to an attachment for pricing. So more to come on that. Okay, other questions there. Laura asked, there are two different labels from attachment 2. One is the vendor questionnaire and the other one says pricing. That would also be a typo, that they are different attachments, and we would clarify that with an amendment to the RFP. Yes, the SAL from section C seems really vague. True. For purposes of our course, we didn't want to get people bogged down in some of the real technical details when we're not writing the technical details in managing this part of the course, or specifically in writing. And you'll wonder, scratch your head about that, but it's true. Principles that we teach about managing and about writing can apply in a variety of ways to whatever type of content you may be writing. So our intent with having this RFP the way that it is to help teach how to build it, how to construct it during the managing course, and things that we can do to strengthen our writing quality and ability in the writing course. So maybe you were tongue-in-cheek, Nora, and that's great. That's fine. I think I'm glad you recognize that.
Yep. Kelson, if I might add, in the real world, outside the training, if you see a very vague RFP and you don't have significant customer exposure and insight, that could be a sign, especially if they're looking for a detailed proposal response, that the customer's making it easy for those who've worked with them and maybe an incumbent to write a really good proposal, because they know more, can read between the lines and add a lot between the lines, and your company can't. So there may be some good deliberate strategic reasons on the customer side for it to be vague. Or, they just may not know. So that's not an automatic answer, but consider why it might be vague when you see that come up.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for your questions here as well. I wanted to jump to one that Jason has asked here, and then we'll move on. He said, from yesterday, it sounds like the capture manager writes the executive summary of the proposal. If that is the case, is the executive summary written before the proposal is finished, or is it more of an iterative process? So since what we're talking about here with regard to the executive summary, it's valuable and important. The best practice is to have a draft executive summary available for the team at kickoff meeting. As you're kicking off the proposal effort that we'll talk about a little bit later as part of managing, as you're doing that kickoff, Capture Manager can have a draft of the executive summary available to be able to communicate to the team the salient points, win themes, focus issues that have been discussed with the customer or validated with them, that we can continue with our messaging throughout. Now, I'm not saying that version of the executive summary is the final one. I'm not, because it will iterate. There'll be some things that will probably change a little bit as we get towards completion, and then it will be finalized. But yes, having a draft available for the kickoff meeting is critical in communicating the right messaging to the team who it doesn't have the capture manager's experience in interaction with the customer. So good comments, good questions. Thank you very much. Let's move forward then on that. I appreciate your questions. One of the things that we do anyway as we're reviewing an RFP is to spend time in gathering from everybody on your team questions that they may have in their technical areas, or whatever it may be. And you, as we transition into a proposal manager, gathering that information and looking at things yourself that you might ask similar to these questions. So it's sometimes the agency will give you a format to use to submit questions. If they don't, it's still good to provide a structure so that the reviewer or the procurement team for the customer can know, of course, you are not going to put submitted by necessarily, but you will include RFP section and what the question is. And you'll want to, as a proposal manager, gather those and be sure to review them to make sure there are no duplicates and to make sure that we're asking the questions in a proper way. Especially when things might be, there might be some things that are contentious or that we talked with the customer about and it's not included in the RFP, and we're kind of wondering why they didn't do that because it was a good idea or whatever. We have to be careful in asking questions and being respectful and direct as we can be. So that's part of the intent that we're trying to do here. Okay, a couple things that we wanted to talk about with regard to proposal. It says proposal writing myths, but this overall stems from issues that we see as proposal managers. So let's kind of go through some of these. Myth number one, proposal writers must use the entire page count limit when writing a page limited proposal. Since we're talking about myths here, that's false. So Dennis, what do we say? What's best practice with regard to page limited proposals?
So best practice for all proposals, including page limited, is be fully compliant, be responsive, and cover other factors you'll hear throughout the workshop. Now, while it's rare the government will give you more page count than you really might need, no obligation to fill it. And if an evaluator is scanning your table of contents and sees that your proposal is going to be shorter than what they asked for, that's generally seen as a positive. Maybe a little skeptical, but if you can accomplish an objective with the evaluator having less to read, that's a good thing. Now, another best practice is when you outline the proposal, and we'll get to that later, allocate specific page count to different sections of the volume that's page limited, and maybe some of that count gets moved around a bit, but focus on hitting that page limit. And if a section does
Agreed. Thanks. Okay, here's one we just talked about. Executive summary should be done when the proposal is almost finished. Little caveat on that, yeah, it needs to be finalized by then, but they need to be delivered and prepared prior, as we talked about, that executive summary to set the tone, to set the messaging that everybody's writing to. Myth number three, pricing a proposal is one of the final steps in the proposal writing process. That may be the case in your companies. It is not best practice. Things need to be happening concurrently as through the development process, and preferably, as we talked about during capture, have some initial pricing going on. We're looking at price to win and other competitive factors during our capture process to help us understand, are we going to be in the target range? Are we going to be able to do what's needed to be done in the target price? So it's when the RFP comes out that we can validate those components and see if there's any changes that have occurred to then be able to finalize pricing, not wait until, not turn it over to the pricing team when the RFP comes. So a lot of work needs to go into that, and definitely not at the end. Myth number four, as long as we answer the requirements, our proposal has a good chance of winning. As long as we're compliant with what they ask for, we're going to win. As we talked about already, there are a lot of things that go into that, and your experience has also shown that, hey, we put out a stellar proposal and we didn't win. Why didn't we win? And so we find out. why we didn't win. But it's important to know that there's more to answering the requirements in an RFP than just saying, yeah, we do that, or here's the answer. There's more to it than that, and we'll get to some of those things as well.
Kelson, if I might
Yeah.
inject a short story for about 45 seconds. I had a client recently at a training before COVID that read a letter from the government providing an assessment of their proposal, and the ratings were all very high across the board, and their price was the lowest submitted. And the letter was communicating they lost. And they were wondering, how could that possibly be? And that person's goal for the workshop was to never have that happen again. So I asked to look at the proposal, and within literally 5 minutes, it was clear why it did not win. It was fully compliant, but did not lay out strategy in terms of benefits, how the government would be better off. The messages were kind of hidden. Again, this sets up some of the managing and the writing parts of our boot camp. So they were beat by a better proposal that probably scored higher and cost a little bit more, but very, very big lesson learned. So please keep in mind, you've got to show value. You've got to give the government a good reason to pick you beyond that you can do the work well and meet all the requirements.
Yeah, great, succinct, great, thank you. Other myths. The more technical information, the better. That's not true. You have, yes, you will have people that are assigned for technical purposes to review those components, but you'll also have reviewers that are not technical people. And so making information intelligible and understandable to a lay audience is also important. Here we go, Jonathan, to you, your point about being a SME. Engineers and technical SMEs have little to contribute to a compelling proposal. I can see pure offense taken in the faces. They very much have critical participation in that. And as in proposal management, it's important to be able to synthesize information that comes from those that have the technical know-how and ability, and to be able to help them contribute well to your proposal. And we'll get into some of that as well later. We should limit graphics in proposals because they distract the flow of the message. This is a myth, with the caveat that making sure that our graphics are appropriate and contribute to the sales message. If it's just a fun decorative design, or just something cool picture to show, or people or something like that that doesn't contribute to our sales message, that is distracting. If it contributes to our sales message, we definitely want that. Jonathan, hand up.
Yeah, just briefly on myth number 6. One of the we had kind of like a hot wash after we did our proposal on on how it went, what could have been better, etc. And one of the things that that I put forward was, and again, I have a very limited experience. That's why I bring it up. We thought it might be best practice for there to be, for example, boilerplate company language on boilerplate company language on something like project management, and then me, the SME, or whoever the SME is, comes in and tailors that to the specific customer. And in the case of this RFP, we felt, I know I was writing boilerplate language and doing the tailoring. So I'm just wondering what the best practice is there. Over.
Thank you for that. Honestly, boilerplate is tremendously valuable if it's used properly, if it's tailored to your customer. That is something we'll talk about also for tomorrow in the writing aspect. very valuable to have that, because you would know as a SME how to customize something and tailor something for your customer. So what things might fit. So yeah, that's appropriate. The problem we get sometimes is an over reliance on that, on boilerplate, and not having it be customized. And you can tell if you're an evaluator reading something that, you know what, this is pretty generic. I don't see how it helps me. So I think you've done it right. That's good. All right, final one we're going to look at here for myths. Reviewers will overlook simple spelling or grammar errors in a proposal. If it's maybe one or maybe two, they might, but beyond that, they won't. It'll negatively contribute to score, because if there's a lack of care in the response and making it usable and understandable to your customer, they may think that you may not have the same kind of attention, or you may not have attention to detail in delivering the services. So it is important to have people involved in the proposal process that can help keep things cleaned up as far as grammar, punctuation, word choice, things like that. Okay. We want to show you, and maybe some of you have experienced this, an EKG of a typical proposal manager. Okay, here's our baseline timeline for things that happen prior to RFP to when proposals due. There's a level of panic line, and here's kind of what happens. Maybe we, as a proposal manager, we don't have enough information, or we're not given any heads up until an RFP is actually out, and now we put on the proposal manager hat and we are going as fast as we can because our company's developing solution and a whole bunch of stuff that we're trying to do after the RFP is released. That is just killer. It's really, really hard. People still do it because there's that proposal due date and the potential of dollars that are necessary to come in for the company, but it's not best practice. So what can we do? If we have some planning and discipline, it'll help to relieve that panic and relieve that stress. We're still going to have some challenges with it, but we won't have the same level of issue. Here we go. No need to panic. If we're doing some planning beforehand, if we've done capture, we have an idea of things that are happening and coming. We may even receive a draft request for proposal, or we may even be able to start pulling information together if we know an RFP is coming from a customer, pulling information together that we can use as a starting point, as a boilerplate start for response. And then we can validate that information when the RFP is released. And then we have the opportunity going forward to make things fit properly and to respond properly. And the effort involved is still there's still things that we need to do as part of best practice in this process, but it goes smoother. People are aware. We are not rewriting things. We're not scrambling to try to make ends meet. Things can flow a lot more smoothly. Mahavir, this EKG is too good to be true. It is possible. From at least two of us on the call here, in the class here, this works well for us. We've been able to do that and have good support of people who know their roles and know what they're doing and are able to get, it doesn't mean there's not stress, it just means that there's no panic. Okay. Thanks. Jonathan, is your hand up for another comment, or is that a residual?
Yeah, sorry, I'm full of these comments because I just went through it and it's all really fresh in my brain. We I had the conversation after the fact that planning more ahead of time would have caused a lot less pain on some of the SMEs, pain and panic, as you lay out here the EKG slides. It's but the feedback that we got back is the RFP. So we got RFP at the end of June and due at the end of July. And originally, the original version of it was as a draft was released back in January, and at the end of January. But the feedback that we got back was essentially that the RFP went through because it was so, I'll just say, government-like in its release. It had so many different versions and changes to it that it was they felt not worth bringing us in the loop to have us go out and read some version of it that was drastically different like a month later. So it was just like a roller coaster ride, and then we just hopped on right before, like on a roller coaster, right before you go down the big hill, that's how it was put to us. So that I don't know how in situations like that you avoid that panic line going up.
Well, that seems like that type of an RFP is ripe for that, and there may not be anything you can do about it. Drafts are typically better than that, so that's a rogue one, and you'll see them unfortunately more frequently than you should. But you guys probably did as best you could with that. So it's not a perfect world, of course. All right, so how can we do that? David Bowl, one of our senior vice presidents, has said this: managing a proposal takes discipline and leadership that can be learned, which is good. We're teaching this class. All of you have some level of experience in this, and hopefully we can hone some of those things with you. It takes discipline and leadership. A successful proposal effort is like any other project management task. It requires careful planning and accountability at many levels. So what we're also going to be talking about with regard to best practice is what your role is and how you can help other people be accountable for their roles. So here's some common challenges that you probably have faced in one form or another with your in proposals. You may see that there are people want to shortcut reviews, not have them at all, or they're as we are talking about accountability, not agreeing to something, not following through. Oh, shortcuts are there. How about adhering to schedule? Some people want to push that back. As a proposal manager, if we set these things up with approval of management, we hold some things fast. Strategic focus. How do we keep people focused on what we're trying to communicate? What's our strategy? Sometimes we have limited resources. There may be a team of 2, as one of you in the class has indicated in your introduction. Their challenges may be in helping your team to write, what to write, how to write, things that they need to be doing to contribute to a compelling proposal. And then one thing that is often lacking is customer focus. We like to write about ourselves and what we know, and the customer doesn't most often care about that. They want to see how their needs are met by working with us. So those are some challenges that we face as proposal managers that we can address with discipline and planning and some leadership. So you remember seeing, okay, thank you. Mahavir actually added another comment. Another big challenge we often face is getting time with senior management to sign off on stuff. And some of that is going to require education about how valuable is this procurement process to the company. And if we get senior management involved at the appropriate times, then we have better product going out, and then it can equate to more revenue coming in. Sometimes that's an education that has to occur from the ground up. But you're right, that is a key factor. So we have talked about some decision gates before. We showed you this during capture, but these three at the bottom are the ones that proposal managers are most directly involved in. So participating in the planning aspect of proposal planning, and then going forward with, okay, an RFP has come out, we're making a decision to continue to pursue it, and then the submittal decision. So during the during capture phase, we may have made a preliminary bid decision about pursuing an opportunity and doing the legwork for the things that we know in preparation that way. So when we have the opportunity with an RFP that comes out, we can validate that and make sure that the things that we thought were going to happen do happen. And it gives us information here about what we do with that validation process. In our role, if we can support that bid validation decision and not undermine it, especially if management says we're going to do it, say, okay, fine, we're going to do it, and we're going to push forward as best we can. So here's some of the questions that go into that bid validation. The things that we see in the RFP that you have seen now, are terms still acceptable? Are there some terms and things in there that may have been influenced by our competitors? So looking things at solution, looking at proposal readiness. How ready are we for going forward with this proposal? If we've had some time before this RFP has come out, do we understand, okay, we expected it would be a 30-day turn. Do we have that schedule built? Do we know kind of what we're going to be dealing with? Do we have a tentative outline? Things like that. Draft executive summary. Are we still able to proceed? So as part of that, there's a blue team that occurs during capture. We could have another version of that after we receive this RFP. Are we sure that these things are met with regard to our perspective in bidding to the customer? Are we okay? Do we have these things in place? And are they still valid now that the RFP has come out? So let's take a break here, a 10-minute break. We're going to come back and get into some of the specifics of the process and more on the roles and the timeline, the activities that as a proposal manager you'll be doing across this timeline. And we'll come back and answer some questions here and move forward. And I appreciate also your comments to this point, some of the learnings from capture, some of your experiences that you've shared both in the chat and vocally. So let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's step back into where we're at here about understanding the proposal process. Thanks for those that have submitted some comments here in the chat. Been some good discussion. Dennis, you wanted to chime in. Anything you would like to add to what Brad's already put in there?
Yeah, no, there's some really good responses there. The two areas I would add is look very carefully if there's requirements for resumes and key personnel that look a lot like something that's unique and without substitution of people who are not the incumbent. That's a giveaway. If a lot of key people need to be present at an orals, that's part of the process. And it's pretty clear that you'd want to retain some of the incumbent staff in key positions. That makes it very hard to compete and bid in that stage. And look at past performance carefully to see if it's too narrowly specified such that it really does correspond either to an incumbent or for a new requirement, a company or a team that's been custom built, if you have that kind of intel, to fit what this RFP calls for. And you couldn't get close, or if it's a acceptable, not acceptable on past performance, the bar was set to be so narrowly prescribed that only one company or team could meet that bar. Thanks, Kelson.
Yeah, in those situations, if you see that, then it really does need to be a go, no go decision. If that's something that, are we going to spend time and effort in a proposal that may not win because of these requirements? You may choose to. I mean, management say, yes, we're going to do it. But having that set up an expectation is helpful in helping them understand the possible lay of the land. So, we talk about the overall business development life cycle. Capture were involved phases 2 and 3. In particular, Capture continues involvement throughout the rest of the phases here, but as a proposal manager, here are the 3 phases that we are most often leading or participating in. So a little bit about some vocabulary with regard to proposal management. We're going to be talking a little bit about a proposal management plan. It's something that is documented information that is valuable for understanding how the proposal's moving forward, assignments, things like that, from schedule all the way through to submittal. Decision gates, I've talked about before. Are we going to stop a pursuit, or are we going to continue going forward? Reviews, these are things that happen in the process and the flow of the development of the document and artifacts that we're submitting as part of the proposal. And they're things that can help us decide how to strengthen our messaging. Compliance, answering every requirement in the solicitation. Win strategy. We've talked about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. From capture, how we are going to address those things in the proposal. And then we showed one of the issues in proposals overall is a customer focus. So as we look at doing our activity with a focus on the customer, then we'll be able to help communicate a better strategy message to the customer. Okay, a couple things about some governing principles that will help us in our proposal manager role. There's some things that we'll look at here with regard to a roadmap and some common characteristics that our proposals have. First of all, the roadmap. This may seem overwhelming to you, but don't let it be. This is just in a single slide here seeking to capture the components that go into being successful in our proposal leadership. So if we have simple and complex proposal types, a milestone of the strategy activities that occur when an RFP is released. We make sure that we review some things, we update some things on a more complex deal. We have a validation of our bid decision going forward. We just start developing the proposal management plan that have some critical components that are addressed to help us be successful in our leadership and planning, and also help everybody stay accountable. Note here that we're not at the kickoff meeting yet, or we're at the kickoff meeting there, and then we provide information, instruction to our teams, and we get to a pink team. Look at the timeline on the bottom. Note that that timeline is not equidistant. There are lots of activities in best practice for proposal managers to do prior to kickoff meeting and prior to people starting to write, which happens after pink team. So during development, there are other activities prior to a red team, and then compliance check, customer focus efforts before getting to your submittal and other activities that happen after that. Sometimes we may insert a couple of other teams. Green team is typically a cost review that may be separate from the proposal document in particular. Gold team is typically just a final management check, making sure that they agree with the terms that are included and the company can live up to and deliver the things required. Cindy asked, best practice, how far from the RFP drop is the kickoff? Brad, you want to chime in on that one? You're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, boy, I hate to give this answer, but it does depend a little bit. If we've done our homework, maybe there's been a draft RFP, for example, and we're fairly far along on thinking what it's going to look like. If we've done our homework, we can do a kickoff meeting pretty quick, you know, within a matter of a few days if it's a 30-day response time. If we haven't and it kind of hit us cold and we're not very prepared, you know, it could nudge up close to that 25% timeline window. But ideally, you want to do a kickoff meeting. I would say if you've got 4 weeks to respond, we better have that done for sure in the first week, even 3 days in if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great, thanks. And I heard Dennis's assent as well. So it's true. There are activities that need to occur still. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done here, but if we've had the opportunity to do some of that homework prior, then we're better prepared for that kickoff meeting. It is not best practice for kickoff meeting to happen immediately after receiving the RFP. People will just be scrambling in all different directions doing things, and there's no context, there's no schedule, there's no instruction. So take some time. It's valuable. It's hard, but it takes some time and discipline to put together things that will make the process go smoothly for your team. Okay, that's the first thing about governing principles. Another one here, characteristics of effective proposals. There's 7 of them here. Compliance, strategy, competitive focus, responsiveness, quality of writing, visualization, page and document design. There are some details provided in the information we've provided to you specifically that talk about what each of these things mean with respect to our response to a customer, and some guidance and checklists that also will help us evaluate the quality of those characteristics. Compliance, here they are. Have all bid requirements been addressed? Is it obvious in the strategy why our offer should be selected? Do we specifically Do we give them a compelling reason to choose us? Competitive focus. It is obvious why this offer is better than other offers. Responsiveness. Does it clearly address customer needs? Customer requirements are addressed in compliance. Customer needs are addressed with respect to responsiveness. Do we know what the customer is trying to resolve? Quality of writing. Are we customer focused in our writing? Are we clear? Do our visuals help us communicate major selling points? And is our proposal professional looking? Is it easy to evaluate? Can evaluators find what they need? Have we structured things accordingly? So we'll talk more about those things tomorrow with these characteristics because they do also impact the content we write. So a little bit about our role as a proposal manager. One of the things that we need to do and be aware of is to be able to understand the big picture. As we're looking at things coming from capture, there are win strategies that you practiced developing on Monday during the class. As those things come forward and we have some initial components from the customer with regard to an RFP or an RFI, request for information, or sources sought, there might be some other information that we could use. Information that comes in for us to then put together to translate win strategies into proposal strategies. We validate those with the final bid request, and then we prepare the information that we disseminate to our team. This is a busy slide for you. You'll have this in in the notes, but there's some primary responsibilities that the proposal manager has, and then some secondary ones as well. So things that we need to be doing and understanding primarily is we are, as a proposal manager, a critical component in helping to make the capture strategy components move forward in our communication in the proposal. We need to be aware of and understand that. We have a responsibility for our team, for information being disseminated, for information being communicated to management with regard to where we are in the proposal, any challenges we have, etc. Here are some core competencies that are submitted, put forth by APMP, the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, an industry organization targeting support of capture and proposal activities. Core competencies here are needing to have the ability to do research and information analysis, how to make information useful for those using it. Are we sales oriented? Do we understand what the methods are for sales and capture? Can we develop a plan and hold people accountable? Can we follow through on things that have been planned? Can we delegate? Can we manage projects? And do we have leadership in the sense of owning the outcome, being supportive of our team, of our company, and owning the response and the quality of that response? So it is a real balance for all of us in this role, having project specific skills, because there's a lot of project management associated with being a proposal manager, balanced with interpersonal skills, because we are dealing with people and seeking their input and their content, getting approval from management, etc. There's some things in this between those competencies or these skill sets that you may need to work on. It's valuable to do. So you saw this diagram as well in the during the capture course. All of the components that come in the capture plan, you as a proposal manager need to be aware of. You need to see what the flow of information has been, what's been identified, what's been developed, so you can be a key part in when you receive that final RFP to know if we have alignment. You can be part of that review team to make sure we can continue forward. So review the capture plan, build your team early to make sure that they are structured according to what your needs are and being able to get things done. This is a notional graph about who may be involved. All those three at the top there may be you, and for the person in the class that is a team of 2, you are all of these, and your manager may be on the program manager side. Anyway, you may have something as complex as this, you may not, but there are roles that are essential to be to help to have a successful proposal development. And if these are compressed or whatever, that's fine, but build the team to the size that you need and establish that early and invite them to the kickoff meeting. So take a look at the proposal management playbook. There's a file we've given you called the proposal management playbook that's a tool that you can use to help track or gather information to use and communicate to your proposal team. The playbook, or this PMP, has an important role, not just for you, and it's not busy work for you, but it's important for communicating for the whole team. This information is centrally located where a lot of people, your team, can access it. It can provide overview information without requiring people to come to you to get this information. Management can check on things, people can see how things are going, tasks, expectations, standards, etc. I like that last bullet there about this reducing redundancy and waste. In proper communication about what's happening with the proposal process, with the content that is brought in from capture, with the themes that we're doing, this is communicated to the team. It helps keep everybody on focus, on track, and providing the necessary information to be included in the proposal. One of your roles then is to keep this content updated and current. So what might be included as a baseline for your proposal management plan or playbook? Here's information that you gather from capture. What's the big picture about them? Who are you competing against? There's some things that we want to make sure we highlight. Roles and responsibilities for the team. Proposal operations is how we're going to do the proposal work, where we're going to store things, who's going to be responsible for what's our cadence of meetings, things like that. And you may have some of these other activities too, about access to secure rooms, where to print things, other artifacts that you may include in your proposal management plan are things that you build. Compliance matrix, a schedule, an outline, information you're giving to writers. There's that draft executive summary that we talked about before. WBS is a work breakdown structure and a work breakdown structure dictionaries. They sometimes are available for larger deals, but that pricing is based on. So those are some of the artifacts and the things that are included in this proposal management plan or playbook, made accessible to everybody on the team so they have that same access and information. So let's start at the top here. Compliance. Developing a compliance checklist. Compliance checklist will help you identify and address the things that are required regarding compliance. So you take the information from the RFP, you break it out into the checklist, identifying the requirements and what section they came from, and that information is then used when you give assignments to authors so they know what they're being required to meet. It's useful during reviews. Someone can use this checklist to make sure we're still on target, excuse me, as we go through the development process. And then we can also develop a response matrix, if required or if allowed, to submit to our customer to help them see where we have been compliant in our response. So some guidelines here for creating such a checklist. Read the RFP. That may be, you would think that would be obvious, but there are many people that do not, or that only go to, in a federal RFP, only go to L&M and don't look at anything else. As a proposal manager, you need to be familiar with the RFP, and not just one time. But with building the compliance checklist, look for the requirement words. List each one separately. Break things out, even if they may be in a similar paragraph. We want to get in the compliance checklist to each requirement asked of us. Use customer wording, don't paraphrase. And then take, as you're fleshing this out, turn each line into an action, a statement that must be done. So here's some verbs that may be included that may not be specifically in the RFP, but in providing instruction to someone, you want them to demonstrate something.
Kelson, real quick, just point out, this is maybe petty, but for those of us that are newer, maybe to proposal management and this checklist, there's a big difference when a government is asking us to demonstrate something, as we see there, as opposed to discuss. And so don't take this lightly. Don't take it lightly that the government is using different terms for our requirements, because when they say demonstrate, they mean demonstrate. They don't mean just discuss it. So just want to chime in. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Appreciate that. Thank you. So this is an extremely valuable tool. It does require some work up front. And even if you delegate some of this out, it's still going to be your responsibility as a proposal manager to ensure that the response is compliant. And where it's not, to highlight that, focus on it, target, troubleshoot, get that done. So for example here, here's an example. How many unique requirements do you see in this paragraph? You could just chat the number. Here's a hint, not one. It's more than one. Okay, we have some 4s, 5. Okay. 6. Okay, it's interesting how as everybody's looking at the same paragraph that we're coming up with a couple of different numbers. Morgan, you have your hand raised. Do you want to chime in here?
No, sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks. Okay, so we have ranging from 4 to 6. Great. Okay, here's an idea about what might be included there. We show 6 items here. Notice that some of those are word for word, and we've highlighted the verb that we're using to indicate what the compliance needs to be. Outline, provide, identify roles of key resources, and there's some expansion there of the transition team. So sometimes you have to provide context for what the requirement is. There we go. That's a way to turn some questions into statements for compliance. Be diligent in doing that, and include a reference point also as to where the requirement came from. So you have, as part of your tool set, that we'll come back to that in a minute then. there's a tab that is in your Proposal Manager workbook in Excel that gives you a sample of what you might include for different compliance requirements and where they came from. It's a good tool to keep track of there, that then helps to move on into other components of this playbook. So some of you may ask, are there good automation tools out there for helping to parse or shred the request for proposal to help us with building compliance matrix? Yes, there are lots of tools out there. These are just a handful. There are others that are available as well that can help streamline that process, but don't rely solely on the output from an automation tool. You still need to own that content and make sure that it's correct. So it's a validation rather than necessarily doing it from scratch. So compliance matrix, compliance checklist, priority number 1. Priority number 2, helping to create, well, not helping, creating a proposal outline. So we want to do something that is going to provide guidance necessary to our proposal team with what they need to be doing in their response. Brad, can I have you jump on briefly here and talk about a couple of things with regard to organizing?
Yeah, you bet. Organizing, it doesn't have to be complex, especially we're talking mostly about government and federal responses. It's clear. I mean, the governing rule is number 1 there. We do what we're told and organize as instructed, section L. We are influenced, of course, by M. And so those are the 2 key sections of an RFP that we look at for organization of our response. Absent a formal L or M, or even a very clear guidance, then the best thing to do is point to there, mirror the bid request, and just respond according to how they ask for the information, and just mirror it back. And then underlying all of that, when we get into the section level or even the subsection level, we should make sure our content is organized around their hot button issues. What matters most to them, and when we can stay within the organization of L as instructed, address the most important points first, their greatest hot button. So those are just 3 guidelines: organize as instructed, mirror the bid request if we're not told how to organize, and then interwoven there is try to hit their hot buttons first and foremost. And again, here you see what we just talked about. L, will give us instruction, augment our outline then with topics discussed in section M, know what we're being evaluated on, what the weighting is, bring over section C, sometimes they all conflict, and this is just, it's a challenge. There's no simple formula for this. But then we suggest, when you get an outline prepared, help those contributors that are going to help you with the proposal by actually placing snippets from the RFP in your outline, so that it will help prompt or guide the contributor to understand what they're responding to. So follow the RFP instructions, mirror the numbering system, use the customer language, and resist talking about the random stuff that was never asked for or they don't care about. Okay, as far as what do we mean by an annotated proposal outline? A lot. We're seeing a lot more of this in the profession of proposal management. That annotated outlines sometimes are actually taking the place of the formal storyboarding process. Some companies use both, but these are keys to creating a good, solid outline. determine the heading and subheadings and structure your outline that way. Again, as requested in the RFP. Follow the order of the topics used in the solicitation. So follow their order. If there's hot buttons that fall within that requirement, address the most important one first. If we'll do that, I promise we make life easier for our contributors. This is really important, is the numbering system. I mean, if we're responding, let's take the case study, give you a little hint here, because we're going to ask you to actually create an outline for a part of the case study. Numbering system, how should we number our transition approach section? Where does that fall number wise in the sequence of the RFP? So think about that when we ask you to do an outline. And we're not going to dictate right or wrong, but you want to make it easy on the evaluators. The numbering system is one way to try to make it easy. Try to align numbering in our outline with the RFP. Use topic or requirement headings for your outline. Just again, let the RFP be your guide. Refer to RFP sections in the outline, help guide the readers. We mentioned that, all right. What I like to see in a good, solid outline is if I'm going to ask Dennis to contribute and talk about transition methodology, for example, in my outline, I'm going to give Dennis a page allocation and say, Dennis, I can only give you 2 pages for this. So make sure you address our methodology, just so you allocate a page target, because you don't want someone contributing and giving you 5 pages and you only have room for 2. Add additional instructions to the outline if needed to clarify, and you'll make life a lot easier.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Yeah, outlines are key and valuable tools, and now we combine these two, excuse me, together. We have them done separately so we don't lose the requirements in the compliance checklist by only just kind of sticking them into the outline, because the way that that RFPs come typically from the government is not in the same order that specifically is going to be developed in the outline. We see instructions to offers, typically outline instructions in section L, but our compliance checklist has information from all of the other letters as well. So we want to make sure that anything that is required of us, that's required in the response, we then map that information to our outline to make sure that we're addressing what is asked of us. And if there are some discrepancies here, some things that we're not asked to address, there's a question that we can ask the customer. You talk about this requirement over here in section C, for example. There's no specific requirement or location to place it in the proposal outline. Where would you like that placed? Or make a suggestion about where we could place it. Anyway, map that together so you have it in the same place then. So I did have this one linked. If it comes up, there we go. So as part of this document, there's an outline section that you can build. And then we'll get to what the status tracker does a little bit later, but it's another great tool that you can use. A tab here at the beginning on compliance checklist.
Kelson, I just want to chime in
Yeah.
quickly. So team, in this class, this is a fantastic tool, and you can make it your own like the other tools we're providing you. So you can see it's in Excel. There's tabs across the bottom. But it's everything from the compliance checklist. You could actually build an outline in here, And then later on, we've already talked a little about bidder comparison and so forth. Later on, we'll talk to you about how to actually keep track of progress as we go as proposal manager using this tool. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that they all have this. It's in their materials, and they can make it their own. It's easy to tailor a little bit.
Yes, thank you. So you have that tool to play with. So for example, here's a sample form with the outline, elements of the outline that we can place there with section numbers, and then fold into that where those items for our requirements come from, whether they be from L or M or C, or whatever other sections that you may have information in that need to be responded to, and that can roll into here. Again, you're still going to have your separate compliance checklist because we need to make sure and evaluate for what those requirements are. But here it helps us to track where we're addressing them in the outline. And then on the other side here is what Brad just talked about, page allocations, also opportunities to assign an author, and then provide other instructions to your authors as to what they can do for themes or recommendations for graphics, or there might be some other things there. But anyway, it's a way to be able to have the outline in one place, assignments, things like that, and the mapping of that compliance checklist. And then you can build from there the information. There you go. There's the order. But take from there, you can put it into a simple format to be able to hand to your contributors and your authors. So information there. This is where you can help writers by adding the components from the requirements that are needed, that they need to respond to. That information typically will go out when you submit the proposal. Some leave it in. If you're page limited, I don't think that's a great idea because most of your space, a lot of your space is taken by that. But you have ways that you may do that. But then you can also include as to where the information comes from and assign page allocations in the heading. So there's information right there in the same document that authors can use to develop the content they need. Guidance provided to them in the same location. So with regard to early planning, as you're in a proposal manager role, things that are important to do, preparing for, we haven't hit kickoff meeting yet. So we're developing a compliance checklist. We're creating an outline to be able to give to authors. If you have multiple authors, it's good to break it into sections rather than giving everybody the same overall long proposal outline. You can chunk it out as necessary. Then you combine those elements into the same one and have your the tool set that you're going to be using for managing the proposal going forward. Make author assignments, and then you can track assignments to deadlines. So putting this effort into this early planning in will help strengthen the value of this activity and things going forward from there. Can you start this process after the draft RFP drops? Most certainly. Please do. If you have that luxury, if you have that ability in working with this customer that gives you draft content, please do this. Maybe it's not a full bore effort, but definitely do this. Put this together to be able to help track, because then when you get the final RFP and you can validate against, you can make adjustments as necessary, but you have your core, maybe even 90% there. You can just revisit. Great. Good question. So we're going to turn you loose for an hour here to look at putting together an outline. A couple of things though that we'll do, and we'll come back to some questions after the break on this if you have them. I wanted to touch on one thing about solution about how the solution begins with issues that come from the customer, whatever they may have, concerns that they have. Hopefully we've been able to identify lots of those things during capture. Those components then are brought towards helping us understand the baseline offer as a proposal manager. So some things that we need to do as we help communicate to the team. We want to make sure that first bullet is an issue in a lot of places where the technical team sometimes continues to evolve the solution, and we needed to say, hey, we need an early freeze so we can actually craft the messaging going with that. So one of the most costly aspects of proposal development can be rework caused by undisciplined changes to the baseline solution. There's a comment from our chairman, Steve Shipley. Important that we put the stake in the ground, make sure that we have the necessary components to be able to build the sales message against. Okay, so here's our exercise. Use the information from the case study, particularly L and M, and create an outline for the transition approach. We're not asking you to build an outline for the whole thing. Look at transition approach only. Use the outline template that we provided for you in Shipley Online, or you can just do it on a blank page, and then submit your outline on Shipley Online. You could also go back and look at win strategy stuff that we're going to be using and going forward here, but the assignment is to prepare an outline and submit that. A couple of tips, again, from what we talked about earlier. You can go back and look at the slides, particularly that we went over for that. But it'll set a 1-hour timer, and we'll come back at 10 minutes to the hour. Any questions on the exercise? We'll still be here as well if you do want to ask questions in the chat, or even verbalize some things. We can answer some questions right now, but we'll turn the rest of you loose and I'll turn the timer on.